Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, it is Tuesday, February 13th, 2024, and I'm Candace Kelly sitting in for Roland. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Black women are being murdered at a higher rate than white women. We'll dissect the study published in the Lancet medical journal that breaks down homicide rates of Black women ages 25 to 44. This is a study that took place across 30 states, and we're going to talk about that with a Senior Adjunct Professor at Adelphi University School of Social Work. We'll also look at a survey where middler moms or Black single mothers voice their concerns about the country's direction, the struggle to cover basic expenses, and the importance of school choice. The Senate passes a $95 billion aid package for Ukraine and Israel. All eyes are on the House to see if Speaker Johnson will bring the measure to the floor for a vote. And New Yorkers are headed to the poll to replace expelled Congressman George Santos. And finally, protesters in the Congo are burning the American flag as rebel groups kill innocent people. We'll speak to a national security and foreign policy expert about why the anger is being taken out on Western countries. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the best, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
On average, Black women are 6 times more likely than white women to be victims of homicide. A new study points to structural social inequities as fueling their higher risk. The study, published in the Lancet Medical Journal, found the homicide rate among Black women between the ages of 25 and 44 years increased by 73% between 2014 and 2020. The study examined more than 31,600 homicide deaths among women over the past 2 decades across 30 states. To dissect these numbers is Dr. Bernadine Waller, a senior adjunct professor at Adelphi University School of Social Work. She is joining me from New York. Thank you so much for being with us today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So when you look at this study, what is your main takeaway when you look at these numbers?
The main takeaway really is that overall, we're failing Black women. Black women are murdered on average across more than a 22-year inquiry at a rate that is 6 times that of white women. And in some areas of the country, we're looking at rates as high as 20 times that of white women. And so there are definitely structural inequities within our system that are underpinning these deaths. And there is a critical and an urgent need for us to fix them.
Now, what would be the solution to this? You talk about fixing them. How do you do that? Because when we look at the core of why these numbers are the way they are, what would you attribute that to?
So there are several factors that we can attribute these really high rates of homicide to. When I say structural inequities, I want you to think of things like economic disparities. So there are very simple things that most managers can do, which is pay Black women what they deserve, pay them just as much as you would pay a white man. And so typically what happens is Black women on average have to work between 7 and 8 months just to earn what a white man earned the year before. And so if you look at this and understand just how our Black families are structured, most of our Black families are structured with Black women as single households, and they are the head of that household. And so what can we do? Really simple is pay Black women more money, because what we find is when Black women are earning what they deserved, they have the financial viability to actually leave very dangerous situations.
And you're so right about that, because people who find themselves in certain situations, it normally to get out would be a money issue. I know a lot of my friends call it the freedom fund. But when you don't have money, when you are not being paid as equally as your counterparts, you don't have that fund to get your freedom. What's the conversation that you would like to see begin happening around this, especially when it comes to state laws, when it comes to legislation on a national level?
Legislation on a national level, I really would like to see, in addition to paying Black women equal pay equity. So what they've done here in New York, which I find to be very supportive of that, is they've passed legislation that increases transparency, if you will, in the pay grade. And so people are not basically lowballing how much they could potentially earn because it's a black box and no one knows what's inside that black box. It would be nice if this were something that were passed literally on the federal level. There are other things that we can do. So equal pay is one thing, but another thing we can do, and this has been in the national dialogue for some time now, is pass common sense gun laws. The fact that we here in America have more guns than people, we're failing the most vulnerable parts of our population, if you will. We're not just failing women, we're failing our children. Children are not safe at school. So what are we doing as a country to fix this? And now that we're in an election cycle, who is responding to the needs of Black America?
Let's talk a little bit about the gun laws. You said that was one of the major issues that contributed to this homicide rate. These particular numbers, are there anything that it surprises you, or is this a study that was long overdue, or have you been studying this for a while and we've heard about these numbers? It just happens not to be on the table for discussion when it comes to the media.
So this actually is long overdue. This is something that has unfortunately never been conducted before. My colleagues and I conducted this study. And so what we started off by looking at was looking at what's going on within intimate partner violence victimization and what's happening within those homicides. And then we decided to hone out and find out what's going on with within homicides overall. And that when we found that out, we were completely shocked, and it was shocking and very devastating to see that Black women were murdered on average 6 times that of white women. If you're looking specifically within intimate partner violence victimization, Black women on average are murdered on average right around 3 times that of white women. And so if you're looking at homicides overall, that rate doubles.
When you look at the 30 states, are there certain areas across the country that kind of spoke to you louder and clearer in terms of these homicides are happening more in the South or more in the East or more in the West?
So what we found is, from a trend perspective, is that the homicides really were highest in the Midwest and in the Northeast. And what we found is those really do when we looked at pay equity. And so the state that had the highest rates of homicide disparities is that of Wisconsin. Wisconsin also ranks second to last in wealth inequities. And so it's not just the pay inequities, it's educational inequities. We're also looking at home ownership inequities. We're also looking at wealth management and disbursement. And so it's not just the pay, it is what's going on economically across the different factors.
And I also read that one of the things you said is that we really need to be speaking about this more, because once we open up the discussion, then that leads to different results. I want you to stay with us, Dr. Waller. We're going to come back from a break. I'm going to bring in the panel into the discussion. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
For the last 15 or maybe 16 years, 18 years, I'll say, since when I moved to LA, I hadn't had a break. I hadn't had a vacation, probably a week vacation here or there. Right. This year, after I got finished doing Queen Sugar and we wrapped it out, because I knew I had 2 TV shows coming on at the same time, so I'm gonna take a little break. So I've been on break for the first time, and I can afford it now. Praise God. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I can afford it. I'm like, I can sit back and ain't got nothing to worry about, man. But this was the first time in almost in 2 decades that I've actually had time to sit back and smell the roses.
On the next Get Wealthy, did you know that the majority of households headed by African American women don't own a single share of stock? No wonder the wealth gap continues to widen. Next on Get Wealthy, you're going to hear from a woman who decided to change that.
Have been blessed with good positions, good pay. But it wasn't until probably in the last couple of years that I really invested in myself to get knowledge about what I should be doing with that money and how to productively use it.
Right here on Get Wealthy on Black Star Network.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Devon Franklin. It is always a pleasure to be in the house. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay right here.
All right, welcome back. We are talking with Dr. Bernardine Waller about the study published in the Lancet Medical Journal that found that Black women are 6 times more likely to be murdered than white women. I want to make sure to bring the panel into this discussion. Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, he is the former senior advisor for environmental justice with the EPA in Washington, D.C. Dr. Larry J. Walker is an assistant professor at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, Florida. And Dr. Nyambi Carter, an associate professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. Thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Ali, I wanted to speak with you first. This is something that should be spoken about. And it's great that we're having this conversation. I wanted to open up the floor so that you could ask Dr. Waller a question about this issue.
Yes, well, Dr. Waller, thank you for your research and the messages that you're sharing with everyone. We often place Black women in what I label as sacrifice zones, where we have bad housing. There are 400 million guns that are out there on the street, lack of enforcement of the laws, the mental health issues that are not being properly addressed and being able to be accessible. And then also there's the pollution that has also been linked to violence and gun violence as well. How do we have a comprehensive strategy to address the issues that are happening to Black women across our country?
Thank you so much for that question. I think in order for us to have a comprehensive strategy, we've got to make sure we're asking and have all the key players at the table. They have got to be policymakers. There have got to be advocates. There have got to be the survivors of the people who have unfortunately been murdered. We've got to have Black families. We've got to have Black organizations. We need a multi-prismic, multi-layered discussion and find out what's really going on. Us in the research houses, oftentimes in academia, our research stays right in the academic journals. And so those are knowledge bases that could also be tapped, that I don't know that we're doing necessarily a good job of tapping those resources. And so I think there needs to be a really sustained conversation across all different sectors of our society.
Dr. Walker, a question for Dr. Waller.
Yes, Dr. Waller, this is a really important study. Congratulations. And reading it and realizing that this kind of comprehensive study hadn't really been conducted, which is troubling in itself. So I guess kind of a twofold question. I guess the first question is, you talked about, it seems like the kind of root of this is structural racism. So I think that's important to acknowledge. But I wanted to talk a little about your point relating to having a conversation relating to intimate partner violence in the Black community, and how do we engage Black men in talking about some of these statistics that we're seeing, because we know those individuals who were murdered, particularly Black women, victims of intimate partner violence, these are people that you know, right? So how do we have a larger conversation with Black men about the kind of behavior that's important to make sure we continue to protect Black women? And secondly, because what you've provided is very important, I wonder in terms of what things you plan on doing in terms of reaching out to members in New York State, the State Legislative Black Caucus, and then the Congressional Black Caucus at the federal level.
Awesome. So those are both very good questions. The first question really does speak to the need to make sure that we are educating. I think the intervention begins with our young boys. It doesn't begin with our men. And so what I do know, for having studied intimate partner violence, that's where the large body of my research is situated in, is that there are educational issues that underpin or educational disparities that underpin perpetration. We also have frustration that underpins frustration. Another thing that underpins frustration is the lack of having a male role model and a male presence. Also underpins perpetration. And so I think there's education that needs to happen within our Black families, within our Black homes, within our Black communities, so that we have Black men who are successful Black men who understand how to mentor. We've got to do that, right? There's a good proverb that says iron sharpens iron, right? But iron only sharpens iron if there is contact. And so we have men such as yourself who have got to. It is important for our men to make contact with these young boys. Oftentimes, if you're looking at things like gang violence and different types of community violence that are also underpinned within our communities, that is oftentimes perpetrated, there is a need for us to make sure that, again, we're making those preventative efforts. to your second question, I've actually started making contacts to folks here in New York City because that's actually where the bulk of my work has been. My primary appointment is at Columbia University in the psychiatry department. And so what I've been doing for the past 6 years or so is working with the New York City mayor's office. And so they're actually in the process of getting this information as well. And then you're right, I do need to make contact with members of the Congressional Black Caucus because they need to know this information on a federal level. I can tell you that I spent some time today making contact with my contacts in the National Institutes of Health, who actually also partially funded this study to make sure that they knew that this paper was out and that they are aware of what needs to be done. And it also may help to increase funding opportunities for other scholars who are wishing to conduct this type of research.
All right, Dr. Carter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waller, for this work. And I wanted to know, what kind of challenges did you encounter? Because in some ways, your work really reconfigures how we think about homicide. I think there's been a larger conversation about Black men and boys as being victims of homicide, but not necessarily Black women. So was that a particular challenge, and does it remain a challenge as you're talking about messaging, particularly when you have to talk about things, as Dr. Walker mentioned previously, such as intimate partner violence and those kinds of more intra-communal dynamics that people would wish not to make available for public scrutiny?
So the wonderful thing about this, and thank you so much for that question, the wonderful thing about this was this data was pulled directly from the CDC's Wonder data set. And so while it has been there, it is publicly accessible and publicly available. Unfortunately, no one did conduct that type of inquiry so we could find out what was happening with Black women. But it is my hope that now that we know that it is a part of the public discourse, that this is something that I won't feel like I'm the only scholar who's conducting this work and helping to push this envelope along, that there are Black women who are murdered. And we have to understand, and I'm pretty sure as well you know, as a fellow scholar at the University of Maryland, that because of the way our Black families are structured, if the Black woman is murdered, this definitely cascades upon our Black children. And what does this do to their mental health? What does this do to our Black girls? What does this do to our Black boys? And so then we enter in the doorway of what we might call intergenerational trauma. And so if I don't know what love looks like, and if love to me, if what was modeled for me is abuse, then that is what I'm looking for out of relationships. And that is not healthy. And so there are things that we can do to help to stop that.
I also wanted to ask you a question about Black women specifically and what they do to talk amongst themselves and other people about abusive relationships that they are in, because I find that it's a secret. They don't want to talk about it, or sometimes don't recognize the signs. Sometimes the signs, financial abuse, or sometimes the kids are used, or many times they're isolated from their families and they just don't know how to navigate. Then they find that when they talk to other women, it's happening to other women too. How would you encourage women to speak up?
Listen, I encourage women to be bold. Chances are highly likely if it's happening to you, it happens to someone else that you know. I can tell you that more than 50% of Black women have experienced or been exposed to intimate partner violence, victimization at some point in her lifetime. And that is with significant underreporting. I would say, based on my work in this area of intimate partner violence, that it's probably upwards of 60 to 70%. And so there is safety, there is camaraderie, if you will. There's information that can be passed along if you know someone who has experienced it, and you can help to support them and bring them along. And like you just said, Candace, there are issues as it relates to the financial viability of a woman being able to leave. A woman having access to funding is more likely to leave. A woman who have had positive experiences within our coordinated care, domestic violence service provision system, she is more likely to leave. A woman who has also had positive messages to say, you know what, sis, I support you. There are things that we can do together. You're not in this by yourself. And we can start off by first believing the survivor. If a woman says she was abused, we need to begin by saying, I believe you, and how can I support you?
As you said, this is a study that hadn't been done before. Very surprising, I think, to all of us on this panel. What has been the response that you have gotten from the study and its results?
It has been, people who have reached out to me, whether it's via social media or whether it's professionally, has been overwhelmingly positive. Folks are generally surprised that this study has never been conducted before. It has been heartbreaking. I've heard from people as far away as the UK about this study, and as close as New York. My colleagues here at Columbia and Adelphi have both said, Byrne, thank you for doing this work. And the survivors have reached out to me and said, you know what? Thank you. Someone finally sees us. We are not invisible.
And my final question for you this evening is this. Have you, and inside of your circle of friends, been affected by domestic violence? What was the impetus for this? Is this something that you were hearing inside of your circle, or something that you realized just had not been addressed?
No, the old adage goes that research is me search. So this was something that had impacted friends. One of my classmates in high school was murdered by her intimate partner. I've had girlfriends and family members whose lives have been impacted by intimate partner violence victimization. And so this was something that has fueled my fire for some time now. I started off on the clinical side of the house, and that I was working with them clinically, and I got frustrated as a therapist and saying, you know what, I can't find anyone who has developed any interventions that are specifically for Black women. And that is what fueled my fire to work on my NIMH funded dissertation research, in which I developed the first theories in the United States that identify how Black women look for help and what they need when they're looking for help. And so I have continued that in my postdoctoral research fellowship here at Columbia University in the psychiatry department, where I'm extending that research and now looking to tailor a brief evidence-based intervention for Black women, intimate partner violence survivors, by Black women, intimate partner violence survivors, and delivering them and partnering with the faith community here in the city.
Dr. Bernadine Waller, thank you so much for your work. Definitely some much needed light shedded on a topic that unfortunately had not been examined in the way that you have done here this evening. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, and we're going to be coming back after a break. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
A new year for a new you. Curl Prep Natural Hair Solutions at curlprep.com is an amazing organic line for curls, locks, braids, twists, and even those wigs and extensions. Women, men, and children are loving this line. Look at this video and you be the judge. People line up to see this product in action at hair shows, and when they take a seat and try it, they don't believe it's their hair. Buy the products at curlprep.com. It works on all hair types. Use code ROLAND, that's ROLAND, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. Parents, remove the ouch. You will love this system because you can comb the product through your child's hair with your fingers. Seasoned saints are loving the product. It's all at curlprep.com. Use code ROLAND, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. You won't believe it's your hair.
Give me that bass, give me that beat. Hit on your tongue, I can feel an explosion. I'll take another if we keep it going.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Creator and executive producer of The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Protesters in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are indeed angry. They are burning the U.S. and Belgian flags near Western embassies and UN offices in the capital city of Kinshasa. They're frustrated because of the ongoing insecurity in eastern Congo. Police ultimately used tear gas to break up the crowds. Now protesters also say that the West supports neighboring Rwanda, a country that has been accused of backing the Tutsi-led M23 rebellion, a rebel group that's posing a threat to the city of Goma in the east. Attacking the embassies is a new tactic for protesters. Some of them tried to damage surveillance cameras at the U.S. Embassy offices as they chanted, "Leave our country, we don't want your hypocrisy." I'm joined now by national security and foreign policy expert Asha Castleberry-Hernandez, who will give us some insight into the issues fueling these protests. Asha, I want to thank you so much for being with us. And I want to start off with this notion that, are we really talking about the resources, the minerals, the cobalt, the copper, that is what's in demand here, that people are trying to get control of? Is that at the root of all of this?
Yes, thank you for allowing me to join you today. Well, that always has been the root of it, that Rwanda has strategic interest in its resources in the Congo. So that is what's constantly making them undermine these, fake peace deals or dialogue saying that we do support peace with Congo. But then they see that as a result of that, that's not necessarily true because of the fact that you were seeing ongoing M23 rebel groups present and contributing to destabilization in Congo. So the dialogue or the discussion of saying, hey, we commit to not supporting the M23 rebel groups there in Congo, and we want peace with the Congolese, does not necessarily reflect in the field because of the fact that we have troops present there and is creating destabilization.
So for people who aren't familiar with the history, because this has been going on for years, there have been about 7 million people that have been displaced over the years. What should they know about the history of this that brought us to now?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, it's a long-term history, and in fact, it's extremely complex. But I will go back to the August of 2023 when we had United States, particularly Secretary Blinken, visit Rwanda and actually discuss these security issues within Congo, saying that this is contribute to destabilization in the Congo, and we really need for you to stop with providing security assistance. Stop with contributing to destabilization in Rwanda. In Congo. So, with that being said, the people in the Congolese in Congo believe that there is not necessarily a commitment to that effort because of the fact that United States has this up and down relationship, but within the last several years, where Rwanda has expanded its commercial ties as well as its security assistance to Rwanda, and as a result of that, that has actually contributed to the destabilization in Congo. Now it goes all the way back to 1994. Genocide crisis back in the day when you had the Tutsis versus the Hutsis, and as a result of that, that has created this natural split for many years, where Rwanda supports these rebel groups against the opposition group for many years. So the tensions have never been cut off. It has been ongoing to where now it's attached to United States support in Rwanda, but indirectly Rwanda's using that those resources, security assistance, to go against the Congolese government. But going back to August 2023, when Secretary Blinken visited Rwanda, he did condemn Rwanda for providing security, for contributing to destabilization there. Meanwhile, the people there believe that that's not good enough, that it's too silent in terms of we need to do more to condemn Rwanda for supporting the M23 groups. In fact, we want to see what you've done, like what you've done for Ukraine, where you provide security assistance, condemning Russia. We want you to be just as forthcoming as you are with Ukraine. You need to do the same thing for us. So very complex, and that's why you're seeing people right now extremely upset with Western embassies, mainly United States and Belgium, because they feel that they can do more.
And is there any word on whether or not the United States or Belgium or any other country is going to be doing more in order to provide aid so that this destabilization does not continue?
Well, right about now, the United States, along with other Western countries, are recommending that both parties come together, Rwanda as well as the leadership in the Congo, to discuss a potential ceasefire, peace negotiations. But unfortunately, the president of Congo says that I will not come to the table unless you withdraw your troops from Goma, from Eastern Congo, because it's creating, again, destabilization. So they want to see more. They want to receive security assistance from the United States, like how South Africa and Kenya has been able to provide assistance to the Congo. So again, the only thing that we're seeing right now as a result of this is that the United States, along with other countries, are trying to get them to the table to discuss peace talks.
What's going on the ground there? How would you describe it? 7 million people have been displaced. First of all, where have they been going? And that is still happening, but how is that happening?
Yes, so there has been just a catastrophic effect as a result of these ongoing offensive missions orchestrated by the M23 rebel groups. It has displaced so many people. It's mainly highly concentrated in the eastern part of the country. And in fact, those people have been displaced to other neighboring countries, to where 7 million of them are just scattered, going to different areas outside the country. And also they're just moving along up and down within the country of the eastern part mainly. So it's creating destabilizations, a humanitarian catastrophic situation too as well. People are just all over the place in terms of assistance, being able to be settled because of the fact that there's ongoing violence, and the offensive group known as the M23 rebel group has been able to make so much inroads. And the more inroads, the more they are able to penetrate in eastern provinces, the more people that are being displaced. And it's not just displaced within the eastern province, it's also outside in the neighboring part of the countries, different countries that are neighbor to Congo.
These rebel groups have a huge stronghold. I want to bring in my panel. Dr. Carter, I wanted to start with you. What question do you have for Asha?
Bringing our awareness and shedding some light here. So what effect do you think these protests will actually have? Will this bring more awareness? Will this have ramifications for the Congolese? Like, what do you think this is going to actually do or accomplish?
Thank you for the question, because for the fact that they're now targeting Western embassies, it is creating some sort of pressure. In fact, they have escalated to where it's in violation of international law, looking at the Vienna Convention. So with that being said, that is what is provoking Western countries like the United States and Belgium to push forth for them to do more peace talks. And also, United Nations Security Council came in again to condemn these attacks, as well as urging for peace between the both parties. But I think also, too, it's probably going to constantly scrutinize more with the relationship between the United States and Rwanda, and how can we in terms of accountability when it comes to human rights, what can we do? How can we better address this issue? Like, for instance, when you look at the leadership at the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, just a couple of months ago, we had Senator Menendez said that Rwanda needs to improve in its human rights records, or else I'm going to pull security assistance that we provide to them currently. So I think you're going to see more pressure, more in terms of decision making on how we're going to move forward with our relationship with Rwanda. Because as of now, what many people think in the Congo is that the United States is prioritizing commercial ties. They're promoting their own interests over this conflict that's going on between them, between Rwanda and Congo. So I think there's going to be some more scrutiny and better decision making as a result of the attacks on the Western embassies.
Dr. Walker, question for Asha.
Yeah, Asha, thank you for your comprehensive coverage and explaining this complex issue. So the United States the issues of minerals and wealth is always at the center of these conflicts. If the United States is involved in any way. I want to go back to the comment you made about Senator Menendez, because I'm curious in terms of, you mentioned obviously Ukraine, we know, and certainly Israel, we know that the United States has given those countries substantial amounts of money, particularly over the last year and a half. But I'm curious, do you have an idea of a ballpark range in terms of how much money does the United States give Rwanda or maybe the UN in terms of these pressure points that they use to address this issue? If you have a ballpark figure.
I think I would say millions of dollars in two separate pots of money. Like, for instance, when you look at the United Nations as far as the contributions towards peacekeeping missions, the United States give millions and millions of dollars to fund peacekeepers to serve in places like the Congo, which has been going on for more than 2 decades, as far as helping to achieve sustainable peace there. So you have that kind of pot of money there. And then also looking at the bilateral relationship between the United States and Rwanda, there's a lot in terms of security assistance where it involves billions of dollars there. So and then you also saw a commitment where the United States has contributed more money in terms of economic and security assistance to both countries as a result of the African Leadership Summit. So I cannot, off the top of my head, know the ballpark, but I know that the contributions has increased over time, especially with the fact that we are in the era of strategic competition, and you see where the Chinese are pretty much looked upon as dominating the continent. Now you're seeing where the United States has prioritized a little more Africa, where they want to compete more, especially be able to secure better strategic relationships. And with that being said, they have poured money into this relationship, their relationships in the continent. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ali.
Yeah, well, first, Asha, thank you for everything that you're doing. I think mine is a follow-up question to what you just shared. Maybe you can help us to have a better understanding of some of these geopolitical dynamics. So we know that the Congo has about $24 trillion worth of natural wealth. And what I say by that is the things we've been talking about, cobalt, lithium, so forth and so on. We know that China has been making these sets of investments there in the Congo and, of course, across the African continent. How is it that the United States, in thinking strategically about the future, is not doing more to address, these injustices that are happening? Because it seems like it puts the United States in a more difficult position, especially since we have an administration that talks about a new clean economy and a number of other things that we're going to need to be able to partner with the Congo, around cobalt, lithium, so forth and so on.
So, while the reality is, when it comes to our foreign policy, unfortunately, the United States somewhat struggles with executing a balancing act, where they're trying to really balance out their strategic relationships throughout the international community. Unfortunately, they have shown where they have prioritized other regions over other regions. Like, for instance, it's no surprise, especially you look at the latest national security bill that was just passed in the Senate, that the Europe, as well as Israel, or excuse me, the Middle East and Indo-Pacific is the priority right now. But with that being said, they're not trying to keep their eye off of Africa, but it doesn't get as much attention in terms of media, resources, like the other three regions. So that's why you see that sometimes there's certain things that fall in between the cracks, or the United States is working on addressing these injustices, but it's not necessarily getting as much as attention and resources and manpower that you would see in like Indo-Pacific, and Middle East and Europe. So there is like ongoing efforts in addressing these issues. It just doesn't have as much, again, manpower, resources, interest as it does with other regions that are more of the priority.
So Asha, yes, go ahead.
Quickly follow up, but why is that? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but why does these countries in Africa have less value, less strategic positioning than some of the other places that you mentioned? Yes, we understand Russia, if it overtakes Ukraine, then there are other countries that will fall. But I've always been curious about why African countries don't seem to have the same value as some of the other strategic locations across the planet.
Yes. Well, if you look back at post 9/11, all the way up until now, where when it comes to our major national security campaigns, like for instance, we were really engaged for 20 years in counterterrorism work in the Middle East, and then we shifted to strategic competition. Unfortunately, when you look at those two campaigns, as far as engaging counterterrorism work or strategic competition, it has been low on the totem pole on addressing these issues in Africa. Like for instance, during the counterterrorism era, yes, Bush pretty much established AFRICOM, but unfortunately, it did not get the resources like it did with CENTCOM, which looking at military operations in the Middle East. So it's unfortunate that within these last 30 years of all our national security priorities, Africa has been deprioritized for quite some time. Now we're in reaction mode, where since, again, the African Leadership Summit, we're prioritizing more the continent of Africa. But in some of these cases, some of this is a little bit too late, because China and Russia has been able to secure better deals, secure better relationships with them. Meanwhile, we were so congested and worrying about what was going on in the Middle East and other parts of the world.
Asha, can you clarify something when we talk about the cobalt or the lithium, the copper? Whose purview is that under right now? Who actually manages it and deals with it the most?
Yes. Well, for instance, Africa mainly does, but you do see lots of interest when it comes to the Chinese. And then also you do see where the United States and also too, Russia is definitely engaged when it comes to this type of resources. But the United States has expressed and actually achieved a mineral deal where they have interest in this as well. So so you're seeing all three superpowers are definitely showing some sort of interest in securing deals in this. But again, there's a level of competition where, some are going to get more out of it, some are not. And those that come late to the table are going to get less out of this, of being able to work very closely with in this market overall.
All right, Asha Castleberry Hernandez, thank you so much for being with us. Listen, this is something that's been going on for years. I'm sure that we will be in touch with you to allow you to give us an update on what is the latest on that. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Okay. All right, you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Stay with us. We'll be back after break.
Grow your business or career with Grow with Google's wide range of online courses, digital training, and tools. Gain in-demand job skills with flexible online training programs designed to put you on the fast track to jobs in high-growth fields. No experience is necessary. Learn at your own pace. Complete the online certificate program on your own terms. Stand out to employers, get on a path to in-demand jobs, and connect with top employers who are currently hiring. Take one professional career certificate program or all 6. Earn a Google Career Certificate to prepare for a job in a high-growth field like data analytics, project management, UX design, cybersecurity, and more. All professional career certificate programs must be completed by December 31st, 2024. Scan the QR code to complete the application. There are 1,000 scholarships available. Grow with Google and J. Hood and Associates. Be job ready and qualify for in-demand jobs.
Next on the Black Table with me, Craig Carr. Immigrants lured off Texas streets and shipped to places like Martha's Vineyard and Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, we've seen it all before.
You people in the North, you're so sympathetic to Black people, you take them.
60 years ago, they called it the reverse freedom rides. Back then, Southern governors shipped Black people north with the false promise of jobs and a better life. It's a part of a well-known playbook being brought back to life. So what's next? That's next on the Black Table, a conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne about this issue of the reverse freedom rides, right here on the Black Star Network.
Hey, what's up? It's Sammy Roman.
Hey, it's John Murray, the executive producer of the new Sherry Shepherd Talk Show.
It's me, Sherry Shepherd, and you know what you're watching, Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Famed record producer and entrepreneur Russell Simmons is being sued for rape. A former senior music executive and video producer at Def Jam Recordings, identified as Jane Doe, says Simmons sexually harassed, assaulted, sexually battered, and raped her in the 1990s. The lawsuit says the incident happened when she visited his Manhattan apartment for a work-related issue. According to the filing, Doe was responsible for Def Jam's video division at the time of the incident. She says her career was disrupted and derailed by her experience with Def Jam co-founder and then, quote, king of hip-hop, Simmons. Simmons faced another lawsuit for an alleged rape in 2018 before it was dismissed. And in 2020, there has been accused sexual misconduct by about 20 women. Simmons vehemently denies all of the allegations. This lawsuit was brought under New York's Adult Survivors Act, which expands the statute of limitations for sexual misconduct claims for 1 year. You know, I think that this is really something, Dr. Walker, when we look at the Me Too movement, as well as Russell Simmons, there's been a lot of talk around him, but there is this lawsuit. And I think that that actually makes a difference. Do you agree?
Yeah, this is like a slow-moving train with Russell Simmons. I mean, these allegations, as you noted, have been around for a while. And, he moved to Bali for an extended period of time. I know that, and certainly there was some conversation about why he moved to Bali. I'll let people fill in the gaps on that and kind of figure out why he moved to Bali. But these allegations, as a number of Black women, particularly who've worked in the industry, have highlighted consistently over the last few years of allegations relating to Russell Simmons. So I hope that, this individual was a victim of this kind of violence has certainly, I don't know if she'll have a day in court, but it's important that the voiceless have an opportunity to be heard. And so we just finished a segment as it relates specifically to Black women and violence not long ago. So I think it's certainly not surprising based, like I said, on the allegations we've heard, whispers, et cetera, and those in print for the last couple of years. And so it will be interesting to see in which direction this particular case goes. I also want to compliment, the state members of the Senate and the House, et cetera, in New York State for passing this law, because it has opened the door and given opportunities to women who've been victims of violence.
They certainly have, Dr. Ali. And when we look at this, we talk about Russell Simmons in Bali. He's been interviewed out there, and he has said, listen, it actually was a different culture back then when we're talking in the 90s. And he says many other things. Of course, he says that he was innocent of all of these charges. He certainly wasn't as nice as he could have been, he says, but it was a different culture. And he has firmly denied all of these allegations. And I wonder what you make about specifically his comment about it actually was a different culture back then.
I disagree with that vehemently. The reason I do is because we as Black people understand whether it was 400 or 300 years ago when Black women were being raped and sexually assaulted, it was just as evil and despicable at that time as it is if it happened, just a minute ago. So when folks try and justify these types of behaviors, you know what is wrong. We're taught from our mothers and grandmothers and hopefully fathers and grandfathers of the things that you just don't do. So for anyone who tries to justify this type of behavior, then that also tells you a little bit about where their mentality is. We should also understand that sometimes people don't understand how serious this set of problems is. We almost have 500,000 people, women primarily, who are raped or sexually assaulted in the United States every year. And we understand that that is a conservative number. Every 68 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted in our country. 1 out of every 6 American women has been a victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. So for Russell Simmons or any other person who tries to justify that, we should understand the individual impact that's happening in that moment, but also how, if we don't address this properly, if we're not enforcing the laws, if we're not supporting those who have been through these types of situations, then it just continues to grow and grow, because it's often in the shadows where people are ashamed of what has happened to them, and they shouldn't be. They should be supported. Because we also know that when someone is sexually assaulted, when someone is raped, that it also increases suicide and other mental health issues that are associated with it. So it is time for everyone to step up, especially men. We should be teaching our sons and our nephews of how this is unacceptable behavior, and that if you do it, then you deserve. Let me say it again. If you actually create a situation where you cause sexual assault or rape, then you deserve to go to jail for a long time.
Dr. Carter, Russell Simmons has said that he has taken many polygraph tests, passed them all, and he says that especially in the Me Too movement, we should believe women. It just so happened that all 20 of these women are lying. What is your takeaway from what you've been reading and seeing about Russell Simmons all the way up to this lawsuit?
I think it's really tough when you see someone who has racked up multiple allegations of abuse and assault, and most men don't, right? Like most people go their entire life and not have this kind of behavior on their record. As Mustafa rightly points out, this was not a different time. It was a difference in terms of what we thought was acceptable, in terms of what we thought or who was believable or who was important. But in terms of basic human decency and respect, it wasn't that different. But, people take the liberties that they want. And I think about Russell Simmons, and I really don't think about him in isolation. I think about him and all the people around him who likely heard of these allegations, who maybe have known some of these women, and still, because Russell Simmons is who he was at the time, as a media titan and a mogul, chose to remain silent and cozy up to Russell Simmons because of his power and what he might be able to do for them. And then I think about, what we do know about him to be true. There was quite a big age difference between he and his first wife, Kimora Lee Simmons. And while by all accounts that relationship was consensual, I think it is still difficult for many people to wrap their heads around a 30-plus-year-old man dating a 17, just turned 18-year-old girl for all intents and purposes. And I'm not suggesting that that age gap alone is or proves anything about his behavior in these alleged events. But I do think it points to a judgment or a way of perhaps thinking about girls and women that doesn't, at least to my mind, speak well of Russell Simmons, perhaps. And when I think about, all the other lists of men who have racked up these kinds of allegations, some of whom have gone to prison behind those allegations, I'm not sure what makes him special, because 20 allegations, one of them is bound to shake out something, whether it's guilt or innocence is something else. But I don't believe that all 20 of these women are lying. I mean, there's nothing to gain. History has shown women do not fare well for making these kinds of allegations, especially against powerful, wealthy men. And so I don't know what these 20 women would have to gain by manufacturing stories about Russell Simmons abusing them previously.
Dr. Walker, Russell Simmons said that at that time, he would have described himself as a hoe, I'm quoting him, and that he found himself in situations that he probably wouldn't find himself in today. When it comes to a lawsuit, and we think about Sean Combs and how he settled without a lot of information going out there because it didn't unfold in the court of law, do you think that that's a disservice, that we don't see these lawsuits unfold in the court of law and that it settles? And do you think that this is something that Russell Simmons might perhaps be thinking to do in light of what Sean Combs did and in light of the Me Too movement?
So first, I think that it's far too common for powerful men in certain industries, particularly hip hop, to talk about their alleged relationships, right? So bragging about them. So his point is consistent with hip hop, me growing up in the 80s and 90s, and it today is as an adult hearing this kind of bravado. So that's the first point. Secondly, I think that once again, this is my point about those who for victims, those who are voiceless. I think that those individuals who have been victimized have the right to find peace. And certainly, I have to recognize my privilege as a man, and in which way these women can find justice, I wish them all the best. I also, your point about what happened with Puff Daddy, I think it's an important one. Once again, we're talking about the same genre, hip hop, which many people on this panel we grew up listening to, and now some of those folks that whether it's hip hop or R&B or with R. Kelly. Some of those folks that we listen to their music or produce, listen things they produce, et cetera, over the years have, the clock is ringing, and some of them have been held accountable and will continue to be held accountable. But I think overall, this once again goes to my point about conversations among Black men, that we really need to talk about, what is important about the relationship and the way in which we value Black women. And that's a conversation we need to have on multiple levels, and be honest with ourselves, because I think it's really important that we do, because otherwise we're doing a disservice to Black women.
All right, well, this is a story that we'll be following. And for those of you who are interested, there is a documentary called On the Record. Several of his accusers come forth and detail the allegations. All right, you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. We'll be back after a short break.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Next on The Frequency, we have an incredible conversation with my guest, Nadira Simmons, talking about her new book, First Things First, Hip-Hop Ladies That Changed the Game. The founder of Gumbo Net tells us the stories behind the women in hip-hop, starting with the first woman that promoted the hip-hop party to Megan Thee Stallion. There's even a chapter on me. Thank you so much for including me in there. It's just so you had to be in there. That's next on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy, did you know that the majority of households headed by African American women don't own a single share of stock? No wonder the wealth gap continues to widen. Next on Get Wealthy, you're going to hear from a woman who decided to change that.
Have been blessed with good positions, good pay. But it wasn't until probably in the last couple of years that I really invested in myself to get knowledge about what I should be doing with that money and how to productively use it.
Right here on Get Wealthy on Black Star Network.
Hey, what's up? Geek Tony in the place to be. Got Kicked Out Your Mama's University, creator and executive producer of Fat Tuesdays, an air hip-hop comedy. But right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
There are an estimated 4.2 million Black single mothers in the United States. Those middler moms are a powerful demographic stuck between surviving and thriving. A recent survey given to over 500 New York Black single mothers highlights their political, economic, and educational school choice views. The Current Project is a nonprofit organization that supports the well-being of Black single mothers. It released the poll conducted by Evitaris, a Black-owned public opinion research firm. Founder and executive director of the Current Project, Alicia Gordon, joins us from Harlem, New York, to discuss the survey's findings. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Before I get started, I actually wanted to go over some of the findings that we are talking about to lay the foundation. And here they are. 69% of respondents believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. Only 7% say it's headed in the right direction. 86% are more likely to vote for candidates running for school office who support giving parents more options to decide where their kids go to school. 64% believe charter schools help the whole public education system improve for all kids. 87% say the one-size-fits-all school system of the past often doesn't meet school needs. 56% have considered choosing a different school for their child in the last year. And 76% are concerned about their child's academic progress, including 43% who are extremely or very concerned. 62% agree that we need more schools led by people of color. 55% say that state and elected officials are doing a poor job when it comes to responding to the issues that are important to Black single mothers. 66% say they barely or can't cover basic expenses. 91% have had difficulty dealing with inflation and rising living costs over the last 12 months. 77% say they need government or public assistance, but find that their income is too high to qualify for such benefits. But finally, not enough to make ends meet comfortably. So these numbers, I think, are not surprising for a number of people, but what do you find is the most important part of this study? Because I found it interesting that Black women really just wanted to be heard, first of all, and that this was a way for them to be heard, especially when there's such a huge voting bloc. We're talking about a lot of issues that will be going on when they go to the polls in November.
Yeah, thanks for that. Hearing you talk about that data, back to me, it is something that as a Black single mother, as a part of this demographic, that I have known and lived this experience. But I think what the data really shows us is exactly what you said, that Black single mothers, who we often consider at the current project one of the most innovative members of our community, are really a force to be reckoned with. These are millions of mothers, 4.2 million, as you said, who are responsible for millions of children, right? And so these mothers who are often working, who have some kind of college or advanced degree, these mothers have started businesses. And as you said, as we coined them, these Midler moms, mothers who are out earning social safety net, but under-earning to economically thrive, are kind of thrust right there in the middle. And so much of the decision-making around policies and things of that nature, they actually get left out of that conversation and out of that policy making. And so what this data survey has shown us, which is actually a national survey of moms from across the country, has shown us that Black single mothers are looking for pathways for to exercise their agency. They're looking for opportunities to really center their voices and their needs, but not just for themselves, but for the real lived outcomes for Black and brown children across the country.
Absolutely. And when we talk about Black and brown children, a part of the study was the school options that they feel that they don't have in many situations. What's the takeaway from the study in terms of what Black single mothers are saying about the school system? Because as you said, there are 4.2 million of them who are more than likely making major decisions, even if there's someone else, a former spouse or a father involved, but they are mainly making the main decisions when it comes to education.
Yeah, listen, when we really dug into this issue around public school choice, is really being able to nail down that public schools should be something that is free and accessible and equal for everyone who attends, right? But we know that it is not the truth. Depending on what neighborhood you live in, I'm here in Harlem, the schools look very different than those on the Upper West Side, right? And so obviously public school choice is one of many choices that Black single mothers are looking to make, because as often the sole caretaker of children, where we decide our children go to school has a ripple effect for the rest of their lives, right? And so while many often try to politicize school choice and vouchers and things of that nature, what we actually see is school choice as an opportunity for Black single mothers to exercise their agency. Because when we talk about centering the lives and experiences of Black single mothers and their children, that next generation, having access to school choices that allow them to really meet the needs of their children, to ensure their academic and social thriving, is really one of the levers that we need to pull and really focus on when we think about what is the next generation has the capacity to do. And so, we really see school choice as some may say as this interrupter, right? When we talk about the many social and economic pressures that Black single mothers are experiencing, something like school choice actually becomes this interrupter, because when a mother has choice and agency and resourcing and support from her local and state government to about where her children go to school, it actually is an interrupter when we think about the kind of social and economic pressures that the next generation face.
And, I also found interesting about this study is that there is this negative view of single mothers sometimes, that they are not interested in the educational process. But the truth is they're just out working 3 and 4 jobs in order to make ends meet. And they may not be able to go to a school board meeting or meeting with a teacher-parent conference. And it seems like they are not interested in the process, but they especially are, because they're out there trying to make ends meet to make sure that there's food on the table for their kids.
Yeah, look, a lot of the conversations that has happened since the survey has come out, we've been seeing Black single mothers on the ground in local organizations who are focusing on ensuring that their local school systems have diverse learning options, diverse meeting options, ensuring that both parents and teachers have access to the kind of resources they need to ensure that parents who are responsible for the lives and thriving of children, they can actually participate. But what the data shows is that not only are these mothers working, not only are they educated, not only have they started businesses, not only are they raising these children, but they really do have a keen interest in ensuring that their children have the kind of academic opportunities as everyone else. And obviously, what that data also shows is that they're dealing with these compounded stressors, right? They're worried about inflation. They're worried about the cost of food. They're worried about a number of things. And one of the things that's not in the survey, the anecdotal stories that we were able to capture, these mothers saying, like, I'm making choices between, do I ensure that my kids eat breakfast, or do I ensure they eat dinner? I actually can't afford to do both, right? But these are the same mothers who are making sure the child shows up to school, that they're dressed, and that they're ready to learn, right? And so we really want to think about how does this become an entry point for talking about real policies on the ground in a local and state way that really ensures that this particular family unit has everything it needs for that kind of holistic thriving.
And you said something key there. Obviously, we're talking about going to the polls, making sure that people are in positions that they want to actually make those changes on a state and national level. Alicia, how do you translate this into political currency? Have you been working with other organizations to make sure that these 4.2 million women are galvanized? What are you doing in the political arena?
Yeah, so as an organization, the current project, we're really pivoting into this kind of thought around power building and movement building for Black single mothers. We have a goal of mobilizing 10% of that 4.2 million Black single mothers by 2028. That's 420,000 Black single mothers. And so what we are thinking about is how do we really equip them to talk about local issues and state and federal issues that matter to them? What are the kind of resourcing that they need? How do we actually equip them to build their own kind of cohorts and small communities of Black single mothers around a particular key issue, so they have the kind of knowledge that is necessary to get from an idea into actual place of execution? And so obviously so much of our work is really tied to moving the needle on policies that move families from a place of surviving into thriving. One of the things that we know as a nonprofit is that programming is great, programming is essential, programming is a thing that really is a bridge builder for families and Black single mothers. But what happens is we program, but we put them back in communities that can't sustain the thriving. Why? Because the policies there are not designed to sustain their thriving. And so those two things for us as an organization really go hand in hand. And so this data survey is really our first punch into this conversation around policy and politics. I've had experience working on different campaigns, both on the state and federal level. And, you know, getting behind that veil really helped me understand is that as a nonprofit, we have to be concerned and have to ensure that our constituents and our mothers are well versed in what's happening around them, because they are a huge voting bloc. When you think about Black women in general as a voting bloc, this subgroup of 4 million mothers really have the potential to move the needle on issues that matter.
All right, Alicia, you said it was the first punch, a very big punch. I want to bring the panel in. Dr. Ali, question that you have for Alicia.
Yeah, well, Alicia, once again, thank you so much. I'm curious. We know Black mothers are doing everything that they can, and they're being champions for their kids, and of course, your organization and others. Who are the other champions that are out there? You know, who are those politicians that we might know their names, or corporations even, who are getting behind this particular set of needs?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that question. When I get questions like this, I always point it back to the folks who are on the ground. I'm a native of Decatur, Georgia, and so in DeKalb County, and so we know the kind of moves that that the state of Georgia and those local leaders have been doing in the grassroots. But we think about people like Cori Bush and other leaders like that who have really used their own lived experience to inform and shape so much of the policy that they have championed for. And you know, one of the things that we have been really thinking about is we find that there are so many mothers who are involved in our work who have this itch to really get involved in policy and politics and movement, but they don't have the resources, they don't have the connections. And so one of our really big things is to ensure that these mothers that we're working with have the kind of know-how and grit and using their lived experiences to move them closer into things around, even around local school board or superintendent, those kind of very localized ways that when we talk about moving a particular community into a place of thriving, that it actually begins on this very localized level. So I'm always pointing my hat to those local organizers who are on the ground, whose names we actually don't often know, who are really responsible for ensuring that families are able to live a thriving life, and whatever thriving means in their particular context. That's a great question.
Dr. Carter.
I would say the same. So I know this is your first bite at the apple, and these women are not just caring for children in some instances; they're also caring for parents and other loved ones. So in your next iteration, will you also be talking about the other kinds of care labor that these mothers are doing?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a Black single mom. I have a daughter who's a sophomore in college, and I was a caretaker for my mom before she passed at the end of 2022. And so I very much am aware of the kind of emotional labor that often comes with as our parents begin to age and as our grandparents get to age. And so I absolutely think that our next step is to really extract the stories and narratives of these middler moms. That is a term that we have coined to really identify that middle group. So our next national survey will be really focusing on who is the middler mom? What is it that they're doing? What are their lived experiences? What are the ways in which they are seeing and navigating the world? And I really appreciate this offering. What are the family dynamics that have a real impact on their ability to get from point A to point B, and thinking about all of the people and pieces that they're bringing with them?
All right, Dr. Walker, question for Alicia.
Yeah, Alicia, thank you for all your hard work. I really appreciate it. The question I want to ask relates to childcare, because in particular in how you responded, what are their thoughts about it? Because we know that in terms of how expensive childcare is, and in many respects it's outpaced incomes. So what are some of the feedback as it relates to childcare, which is such an important issue for not, all families throughout the country, particularly we talk about single mothers?
Yeah, as I mentioned, some of the anecdotal stories that we got back in the raw data, childcare was one of the primary things that was a barrier for Black single mothers. The second thing, the primary thing was cost of living, right? Rent, things of that nature. But the second thing that came up was childcare. And when Black single mothers are having to make decisions about, do I go and finish my last 2 classes of my master's degree or my associate's degree, or do I decide to take a course in how to really scale my business? Oftentimes they're having to make decisions about whether or not can I just afford it, but who is going to watch my child, and how do I make sure that my child is safe? And so, Moms First is a big champion around thinking about how childcare as not just a need for families across this country, but really a federal mandate to ensure that the cost of childcare is aligning with what families are able to afford. So they're doing really great work around that. But listen, childcare, I remember being a student at Emory when I was working on my master's degree, and my daughter was like in the 3rd grade or so, and being in this place of like, once the free after school care ended, having to bring her with me to class, right? And so when we think about the lives of Black single mothers and all of the work that they're doing to close the social and economic gap for themselves, that childcare piece is so critical, because childcare and the access to it and affordability to it is sometimes the primary thing that is in their way to getting to a place of where it is that they actually want to go. And then obviously we widen that scope around our role as community, right? That one of the reasons I was able to get through that degree at Emory is because my professors allowed my daughter to come to class, and my friends and classmates make sure she had little Chick-fil-A Happy Meals and things like that to make sure that she was fed. But and so I think that's a really important question, because until policy catches up with the realities of Black single mothers, whose role and job is it to ensure that we are using a communal approach to ensure that folks are getting the needs, their particular needs met? And so I think it goes without saying that childcare is an issue for a lot of folks. But when we solve for something like childcare, it actually creates a longer runway for Black single mothers to get to where they're going.
Alicia, you certainly had a great community down there at Emory University. I'm wondering about the term single Black mothers. I know that some people find that to be negative, just in terms of calling themselves single Black mothers. But the way that you're presenting it now, I'm going to share with some of my friends who think of it in a different way. You're actually talking about it as a voting block, as something of power. How would you share with others that this term single Black mothers is nothing to frown upon, perhaps nothing to turn your nose up at?
I love that. Listen, the entry point into Black single motherhood is varied, people's spouses and partners pass away. Black women actually choose to have children, and they actually make that choice and have the right to make that choice with or without a partner, right? Sometimes relationships don't work out. So I think it's really important as we think about the connotation of the phrase Black single mother is that we recognize that there are many entry points into this lived experience, right? And regardless of what the feelings may be and the politicizing of it may be, is that Black single mothers made a choice and they're living that choice out. And so we have a role and responsibility as community, as leaders, as politicians to understand that this particular group of women who have made a choice to live this life out, not only for their children, but for themselves, right? To be able to support them and to look at it in a positive way. My story I often find is, I've gone through the gamut. I have been on social safety net. I have experienced home insecurity. And the reason that I am able to be on this stage and in this platform is because people saw the gifting in me, right? And they were to resource me, and they were willing to say that my story or my experience or however I got into this place of Black single motherhood is a moot point, right? That the commitment was to ensure that my thriving, which was directly tied to my daughter's thriving, was of importance to them. And so that is why this work matters, and this is why I do what we do, is exactly what you said about this narrative change. How do we really get out of this kind of old, antiquated, racist, misogynistic ideas around motherhood and really call a thing, that we are one of the most innovative members of this community. We know how to make $1 out of 15 cents, and that's what we've been doing, and that's what we're continue to do.
That's right. Let's call a thing a thing. All right. Alicia Gordon, founder and executive director of the Current Project. Thank you so much for shedding light on that issue and really giving it a different spin. I'm sure that not only I learned a lot tonight. Good to see you.
Of course. Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Stay with us. We're going to be back after a short break.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Next on the Black Table with me, Craig Carr. Immigrants lured off Texas streets and shipped to places like Martha's Vineyard and Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, we've seen it all before.
You people in the North, you're so sympathetic to Black people, you take them.
60 years ago, they called it the reverse freedom rides. Back then, Southern governors shipped Black people north with the false promise of jobs and a better life. It's a part of a well-known playbook being brought back to life. So what's next? That's next on the Black Table, a conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne about this issue of the reverse freedom rides, right here on the Black Star Network.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Devon Frank.
I'm Dr. Robin B., pharmacist and fitness coach, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Early Tuesday, the Senate passed a $95.3 billion foreign aid bill with assistance for Ukraine and Israel. The vote was 70-29, with 22 Republicans voting in favor, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Former President Donald Trump made clear he does not support the bill. The bill now heads to the House, but on Monday night, Speaker Mike Johnson strongly suggested he may not take the Senate bill on the floor for a debate or a vote because it does not address the southern border. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling on Speaker Johnson to do the right thing.
Today, the Senate keeps its word to Ukrainians in need, desperate need, of supplies and ammunition, to innocent Palestinian civilians in need, so much need, of relief, to Israelis in need of support, and to U.S. service members on patrol in the Indo-Pacific, the Red Sea, and around the world. Today, we sent a clear bipartisan message of resolve to our allies in NATO. With the strong bipartisan vote in the Senate, it's clear that if Speaker Johnson brings this bill to the House floor, it will pass with that same bipartisan support. The responsibility now falls on Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to approve this bill swiftly. And I call on Speaker Johnson to rise to the occasion, to do the right thing, bring this bill to the floor.
So, Dr. Carter, when we look at this, there was no money for the southern border, but attempts had been made on this, but Donald Trump spoke, people changed their minds, and this is a situation where we are today. An attempt was made. Now they're asking after they did not want or did not make good on any attempt, and now they're looking for money in the southern border. It seems quite ridiculous.
Well, it is ridiculous. And I think one of the things that we see here is what happens when you let someone who's actually not in office, who doesn't have that responsibility, make decisions for you. Because Donald Trump right now is not doing anything other than fighting off criminal allegations and running for president. But these people are so beholden to Donald Trump that they're, I guess in some ways, campaigning against their own interests. The other thing I think is important for these Republicans to understand and others and the general public to understand is that many of the people that are coming to the southern border right now are seeking refuge or asylum. That is a very different class of entry than what we are talking about. So when people say immigrants or the unauthorized, they're not understanding that all of those people are not considered the same people under the law. And so when many of those people that Donald Trump thinks that you can just keep out by fiat if you just gave more money or you close the border, we actually can't do that by international human rights standards. That doesn't mean that they will get into the country. Most, in fact, do not. But if people are making a claim of persecution, that puts them into a different status. So trying to tie all of those things together is actually not very smart. But we can see that Democrats at least were going to entertain it because they wanted to get this Ukrainian and Israeli aid package passed. And now that Republicans have nixed it, it's too late to go back and then try to add it back in because you want to sell a political point. Because part of what Donald Trump wants is this chaos at the border, right? That seeming chaos at the border. So then he can come back in and say, I'm the only person who can fix it. Something that he vowed to do his first time around and didn't do when he was in office.
And that's probably why he's speaking on this. In fact, Dr. Carter, I want to stay with you for a moment. Do you think, though, that the fact that he does have this power right now certainly is going to translate into something at the polls? How do you see the political hold that he has?
Well, look, I mean, it's true that, the Republicans don't really have a credible challenger right now. I think he is very likely to win in 2024, in part because of people's, tendency to want to be contrarian, right? We see that pendulum swinging back and forth. So this is not to suggest that there is nothing to be critical of Joe Biden about. And it also, I think, is because members of his own party, when they had an opportunity to stand up and stand against him, demurred because they were sort of being political instead of being ethical in that moment. And now the Republican Party has the candidate that the Republican Party deserves. This is the candidate, whether they meant to or not, that they campaigned for when they refused to say anything about January 6th, when they allowed him to go after fellow Republicans who, did the most basic thing, which is their job, and say this singular person does not have the right to derail the democratic process. So, Donald Trump could very well win in 2024, and fear doesn't seem to be enough to sway people from either voting for Joe Biden or, coming out to the polls, period. I mean, a lot of people will probably stay home rather than vote for Donald Trump. But we know in a tight election, those votes will mean everything.
Dr. Walker, what do you think is going on with Mike Johnson here, his decision to maybe not even bring this to the floor? What's the political strategy you see behind this?
That is the question. So let me start by saying I saw a former colleague who I worked on Capitol Hill with this weekend. She posted a picture and said, with her and I, said, we worked on the Hill when there was bipartisanship. So let me start with that story first of all. So let me tell you that, Speaker Johnson, his inexperience and his right-wing political ideology are contributing to the United States' continued decline. And I want to be very clear about what's happening here in the United States. And I know there's been a lot of conversation about the upcoming election. The United States is behaving like a country in steep decline. When they negotiated a bill in the Senate side on a bipartisan basis, Speaker Johnson, and we've heard, Schumer, among others, indicate that he had no interest in involving those negotiations. The bill itself was really a giveaway by the White House in terms of it's the most, comprehensive, and some certain progressives might say challenging bill as it relates to there was no path for citizenship for more than 11 million those who are here in this country. So in addition to that, this bill that would provide funding to Taiwan, Israel, and I'm missing the last piece here. What am I saying? Oh, in Ukraine. It's also in terms of what is the United States geopolitical strategy as it relates to the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. And so whatever your views on those particular three countries is, you have to have some kind of geopolitical strategy, and you have to provide the necessary funding. You can't have it both ways. You can't say we don't support this comprehensive immigration bill and then say we don't want to fund these countries and then we want a standalone bill just for Israel. That's not going to happen because it has to pass both chambers. So Speaker Johnson has to really figure out what he's going to do. And I know he's being threatened with possibly, losing the speakership, but this is the big boy chair. And he has to start making decisions that make sure that our domestic and our international policies are consistent.
Dr. Ali, it is all in Speaker Johnson's hands right now, so to speak, as to whether or not to even bring this to the House floor. What are your thoughts about what's going on behind closed doors here and where Trump plays into all of this? Because certainly he is a part of this equation.
Well, I really would say that Trump is the linchpin, actually. If Trump hadn't spoken out and said that he did not want this to happen, then we would no longer be sitting in this moment. The bill would have passed. And if the bill had passed, policy would have caught up with reality, as we talked about in the last segment, because we have a serious set of issues that are happening on both our southern border, and no one talks about the northern border. So we have an opportunity, as Dr. Walker just shared, to have the most conservative immigration bill in the history, well, not in the history of our country, but in modern history. But because Donald Trump did not want it to happen, because as folks, Dr. Carter had shared before, he needs a chaotic situation to be able to bring forward to voters because they have no policy. If you look at the things that they should be talking about, and if you look at the few things that they do bring forward, and once again, talking about from our last segment, it keeps people in a survival mentality instead of a thriving set of opportunities to move forward. So what's happening behind the scenes is that people are making political calculations in this moment about if this will be able to help them garner additional votes or if it'll take votes away. And unfortunately, when you're making those sets of calculations, you're not actually thinking about people's lives. In the video we just saw, we saw at the top of that hill a person holding their baby next to that razor wire. So folks are saying that, that after this long trek, that you still can't take a few steps further and protect those children that are there. When we see these types of actions also, people are saying that these Ukrainian lives don't matter more than the Russian lives, which, not my words, but the former president, Donald Trump, has talked about how he supports Russia, how if folks are not paying into NATO, that they deserve what will happen and come from Russia. So once again, policy is not dealing with the reality of the situations that are happening on the ground, happening to everyday people's lives. And those are the conversations that should be happening. But unfortunately, as someone along with Larry and others who've been in these situations and worked on the Hill, we know, unfortunately, sometimes people are not thinking about everyday people's lives. They're thinking about the political process and how to get over.
Dr. Walker, when we look back at what happened last week when it comes to the money for the border, and then we talk about what's on the table now and how they don't want to pass it because there is no money for the border, you can't really have it both ways. I'm wondering, do you think that Donald Trump was just doing some political flexing? Because really, at the core of this, it just doesn't make sense with the back and forth, because you just can't have it both ways. But the one way that Donald Trump was able to be heard and seen here is to say to people, I still have power.
Yeah, he runs the Republican Party. We just saw with the RNC in terms of McDaniel being removed and she's going to be replaced. He is the leader of the Republican Party. And to your point, relating to the how he's flexing his muscles, political muscles, so to speak. Listen, like I said, the bill last week, there are a lot of people who were not really all that progressives were really all that interested in that bill becoming law. And President Biden really did give in on a lot of issues. But as it relates to former President Trump, when you look at surveys in terms of what issues Americans are concerned with, the border, because so much of the propaganda from many platforms is like the second to the economy in terms of concerns for a lot of Americans who don't even live anywhere near the border. So he realizes that. So yes, it's political, because if that bill passes, I mean, he can't talk about caravans and all the other kind of racist rhetoric he utilizes throughout prior to becoming president, during his presidency, and since then. So he can't use any of those to convince, whites of various socioeconomic backgrounds that we're being invaded by all these brown people, and what are we going to do about it? And so if he doesn't have it as a tool, then that in terms of, whether he becomes president of the United States again, that could cause a problem for him, because then President Biden can run on his comprehensive immigration bill, and he also can run on the economy. So he doesn't care about America, and he certainly wants to continue some of that racist rhetoric he's been using for years prior to becoming president.
All right. Well, we'll have to see if this makes it even to the House for consideration. We're going to take a little break. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
A new year for a new you. Curl Prep Natural Hair Solutions at curlprep.com is an amazing organic line for curls, locks, braids, twists, and even those wigs and extensions. Women, men, and children are loving this line. Look at this video and you be the judge. People line up to see this product in action at hair shows, and when they take a seat and try it, they don't believe it's their hair. Buy the products at curlprep.com. It works on all hair types. Use code ROLAND, that's ROLAND, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. Parents, remove the ouch. You will love this system because you can comb the product through your child's hair with your fingers. Seasoned saints are loving the product. It's all at curlprep.com. Use code ROLAND, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. You won't believe it's your hair.
Give me that bass, give me that beat. Hit on your tongue, I can feel an explosion. I'll take another if we keep it going. Open it up, give a toast to the moment.
Hello, we're the Critter Fixers. I'm Dr. Bernard Hodges.
And I'm Dr. Terrence Ferguson.
And you're tuned in to
Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, so in our last segment, we discussed how the Senate agreement on the border crisis crumbled. Well, the Lincoln Project produced an ad calling out Donald Trump's order to the Republicans to block the border security bill that would have provided Border Patrol crucial resources to secure the southern border. And Trump isn't too happy about that. Take a look.
Joe Biden is ready to protect America's southern border, crack down on illegal crossings, set tough but fair new standards, build up Border Patrol, adding thousands of new agents, stop the flow of fentanyl, child sex traffickers, and even terrorists. There's only one problem.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has ordered Republicans to block the toughest immigration bill in decades. For all their tough talk, their solution is to do nothing, because Donald Trump needs chaos to win.
He'd rather weaponize this issue than actually solve it.
If he wins, he'll do nothing, just like last time. His wall, a joke. Donald Trump doesn't care if your family's safety or the lives of law enforcement officers are in the balance. He's on the side of the cartels, coyotes, and child traffickers. There's only one candidate who will do something about our border, and it was never Donald Trump.
All right. Well, Dr. Ali, somewhere Trump is seething. What's your take on this commercial impact it might have?
I mean, it's a powerful commercial. It hits on all the points that someone should need to know to make a decision, especially in relationship to the border, if you want to support Donald Trump or Joe Biden. You know, it's just, unfortunately, you can share with folks the facts. You can share with folks science. You can share with folks the reality that's playing out on the ground. And there is still a significant now percentage. We used to say it was a small percentage of folks, but now it is a significant percentage of folks that it still will make no difference to them. They will continue to feed off of the hate that Donald Trump shares with those who follow him and the misinformation. So it is powerful. I hope lots of people see it, and I hope that they will then critically think about their vote and whom they want to give it to.
You know, Dr. Carter, I think that's one of the issues that Dr. Ali is bringing up, and that is that we have so many ads and we are just attacked by so many things on social media, on television, even when they seem to be facts that really are facts that most Americans would agree are facts. People choose not to believe. What do you think about these ads, these political ads that are trying to make their point? Certainly Trump was mad at this, but will the public really, really pay attention?
Probably not. I mean, it certainly won't sway anyone one way or the other. I mean, I think these ads are designed to do something like what we saw, which is to generate a reaction out of the candidate themselves. To change the conversation. They're meant to do lots of things. If they generate votes, great. But I don't really think that there are many people at this point who don't know who they would support. Now, there are people who don't like either candidate, sure. But the person who says, I really don't know, I need more information, is a very rare bird here. And I think to Mustafa's point, and I think it's an important one, which is we are so polarized at this point. The people who like Donald Trump no matter what, love him, in fact. There is nothing, virtually nothing that he could do to lose their vote. These ads won't move them one iota. The people who are firmly in the camp of Joe Biden, this is going to further solidify their choice for Joe Biden. The people who are still sort of shrugging their shoulders and saying all that, these ads won't do anything for them, because a person has to be able to receive the message, first of all. And so just because this message is put out there doesn't mean that people are there to receive it. So more than anything, I think these ads are designed to make Donald Trump act out, which he does because he does not like criticism, and to change the conversation.
Yeah. You know, Dr. Walker, when we think about an ad maybe from even 10 years ago, certainly the impact of this is different. It does cause Donald Trump to react in a certain way. But at the end of the day, what counts is what happens in the voting booth and whether or not he's going to get people's votes. What can you talk to me about in terms of what these political ads used to be and what you think the ads of today, ones like this, are and their impact?
You know, I think political ads are important and can have an impact. But I want to go with Dr. Carter. You know, you win elections at the margins, and there, as Dr. Carter's point, you know, we're polarized as a country. I would argue polarized from day one. But you know, in terms of, there's individuals who are going to vote for Donald Trump regardless of seeing this ad. We've seen interviews of people, and look, he's got dozens of indictments And, you've seen people and use all kind of rhetoric relating to being a dictator. You've seen people say, yeah, he should be a dictator at day one. And so we're at a point where in our country, and I made a point about, a country in decline. Healthy democracies don't need ads like that. And I also want to add some context because I have to get this off my chest. The people behind the Lincoln Project are Reagan Republicans. And we're here because Donald Trump is here because of all the work that they did historically during the Bush Senior and, Reagan at the time. So I have to just kind of get that off my chest because even though it's a great ad, those are the same individuals that planted the flower that gave us Donald Trump.
Dr. Ali, what do you think now is something that would be able to change people's minds about the border crisis? We're going to be hearing about this for at least a week, I'm sure, as the Speaker of the House tries to potentially get this on the floor or not. What could even change anybody's mind at this point, whether you are somebody who might be a politician or somebody who has to eventually make a vote in the booth?
I mean, I think you have to bring it to the ground. I come out of the grassroots movement, so the storytelling has to be from the perspective of folks who actually risked their lives to try to come to this country, looking for asylum. So I think the more stories that can be brought forward of the mothers and of those children and elders who have been willing to make that trek and why they were willing to do it and why we need to make sure that we have a strong and equitable immigration process will touch some folks. Because we find it easy to demonize folks. Most folks have never, ever talked to someone who's crossed the border and why they came here. So they are able to be, sort of created these caricatures of who they are and that they're just trying to break the law and all these other types of things without understanding and touching people's humanity. So I think that is really a missing component. It's not a documentary. It's not this clip that happens on the evening news. It is really about creating space for people to hear and see themselves reflected in the challenges that people have had to face to come here and why they want to be a part of this American dream that everybody talks about.
Dr. Carter, do you think that the Biden-Harris administration has done what it needs to do in order to bring the type of attention that this particular topic needs so that people can have some intellectual clarity around all of the details with immigration?
I would say, in short, no. And I think they probably don't want people to have that clarity because their border policy right now is not the most progressive if we're being charitable. And I don't think they want people to think about that border policy because the only option you have, particularly if you're trying to sway people to your side, typically those people are going to be more conservative, is to look how much pain I was able to inflict on these people. Look how much more difficult we made it to enter this country. And we know a lot of those policies that Biden are using are continuations of Trump era policies. I mean, we all seen that clip of Kamala Harris sitting up there telling migrants, do not come. So I don't actually think it does the Biden administration any good to focus on this issue because the only option they have is to say, we're strong on this. And that's going to turn off perhaps folks who are more liberal on this issue who can't vote for Trump, don't really want to vote for Biden, but would hold their nose to do so. I don't think it does them any favors to raise that issue. And I don't think that's an issue that's going to be a winning issue for Biden, particularly with their voting demographics. For Trump, sure, but for Biden, no.
All right, this border security bill, we're certainly going to be hearing more about it, even after the speaker decides to bring it to the House or not, and we will be following that. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Stay with us. We'll be back after a break.
Grow your business or career with Grow with Google's wide range of online courses, digital training, and tools. Gain in-demand job skills with flexible online training programs designed to put you on the fast track to jobs in high-growth fields. No experience is necessary. Learn at your own pace. Complete the online certificate program on your own terms. Stand out to employers, get on a path to in-demand jobs, and connect with top employers who are currently hiring. Take one professional career certificate program or all 6. Earn a Google Career Certificate to prepare for a job in a high-growth field like data analytics, project management, UX design, cybersecurity, and more. All professional career certificate programs must be completed by December 31st, 2024. Scan the QR code to complete the application. There are 1,000 scholarships available. Grow with Google and J. Hood and Associates. Be job ready and qualify for in-demand jobs.
Hello, I'm Paula J. Parker. Truly proud on the Proud Family.
I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Proud.
Hi, I'm Jo Marie Payton, voice of Sugar Mama on Disney's Louder and Prouder Disney Plus. And I'm with Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
Has been missing from Ogden, Utah since February 4th, 2024. The 15-year-old is 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighs 200 pounds, has black hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information about Paige Jones is urged to call the Ogden County Police Department at 801-395-8221. All right, well, an Ohio city settles with a black man attacked by a canine dog. The city of Circleville will pay Jadarius Rose $225,000 after being bit by a dog that was part of the city's police department canine unit. According to police reports on July 4th, authorities pulled Rose over for failing to stop for an inspection. Despite surrendering with his hands raised, a canine police dog attacked him, pulling him to the ground. The video shows a Circleville Police Department canine officer deploying his dog on Rose, who was lying on the ground. All charges against Rose were dropped. Ryan Speakman was fired shortly after the incident for not meeting the standards and expectations of an officer. All right, so, I will say, Dr. Ali, that I was kind of surprised at the amount that he was given. I know that he settled. Certainly, we hear numbers that are a lot bigger than this. Was that something that kind of struck a chord with you, how much he got for this?
It struck a chord because, as you said, I thought he was going to receive a larger judgment than they did. I mean, there are all kinds of impacts that can come from something like this. Of course, there's the physical, but there's also the mental impacts of being attacked. I often say hit them in the pockets. Unfortunately, this time I feel like the pocket was only a quarter of the way filled with what I'd like to have seen the judgment be.
Right. Dr. Walker, what is your takeaway, I guess, with the settlement? And I guess just about the fact that this was a dog that was involved. Certainly we hear normally about the police and their involvement and they're using whatever instrument of choice in order to beat someone. And now we're talking about a dog. And I thought maybe that might have been the reason that this was such a low number. But it was, in fact, a police officer that said, go attack Rose.
And it's important to remind folks who are watching that photo could have been black and white and taken in the 1960s. It's important to know canines have consistently been used to brutalize Black folks. And I agree, there really is no amount of money that they could have provided to really, in terms of the physical and mental trauma of this particular kind of incident. And it just really highlights how the justice system traditionally does not work for Black folks. And it's hard for us to get justice. Even when we have some folks who unfortunately lost their lives in law enforcement, their names have been dragged through the mud, but no, this is not enough compensation. And once again, I think it's reflective of an uneven justice system that treats Black folks, even after they're brutalized, that they're less than.
Dr. Carter, Rose said something that I think a lot of Black men and women feel when they're on the roads, that when he saw the police officers signaling for him to pull over, he was scared because he couldn't imagine what he was doing wrong and why were all of these police officers lining up behind his truck. And I think that is a very fair takeaway, that when you are on the road, you're driving for a company, you think that everything is in order. Why are the police stopping me? I feel like something bad is going to happen, which Dr. Carter, it ultimately did.
Yeah, I mean, look, the roads have never been safe for Black people in any capacity, and I think, we sometimes think about the advent of like body cameras as being the potential to stop these kinds of activities from happening, and we see they don't actually do that. That these were officers in full view through their own cameras. Were providing these images of this man being attacked and them escalating this event, and it happens over and over and over again. And I think it was Dr. Walker said, these images could have been taken, 50, 60 years ago. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a very long time before we get relief from this kind of treatment. And when we look at the deployment of animals, and we look at the ways in which Black lives are not, in fact, valued by the justice system, I think it's even more disheartening, because what are people supposed to do? Stop driving on the highways? Stop being, long distance drivers? Like, that's not even a possibility. So we have to take our lives into our hands every time we step out that door in a very different way than many people do.
So listen, Dr. Walker, we have about 1 minute left, but I thought what was an interesting takeaway from this is that the police officer bought the dog in question that did the attacking for $1. And that was a part of the agreement, that he was able to get this dog who attacked Rose for $1. What are your thoughts about that?
Black lives don't matter. I mean, you can't, it's an intersection of racism and capitalism in America. I think that's the best way to describe it. But this speaks once again, it adds salt to the wound, and it's a tragic story.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to end with you, Dr. Ali. He bought the dog for $1. I don't know what he's going to do with the dog. Maybe he cherishes the dog, thought he did something right. Final thoughts for you on this dog that he was able to purchase for $1.
A system cannot fail those it was never meant to protect.
All right. I want to thank all three of my panelists for being with me this evening: Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, Dr. Larry Walker, and Dr. Nyambi Carter. Thank you for providing your insight on tonight's topics. As always, good seeing you.
Thanks.
All right. And thank you to everyone else for watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Roland will be back tomorrow. Have a good night.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair, take your seat at the Black Table with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.